is a famous British writer who wrote the saga of the young wizard Harry Potter. The popularity of the franchise is so phenomenal that at some point it was even necessary to create a psychological emergency hotline for people who couldn't accept the end of the story. From this video, you will learn about what was left behind the scenes, namely about the life of the writer. J.K. Rowling, how Harry Potter's mom lives and how much she earns. Joanne Rowling was born on July 31, 1965, in the English city of Yate near Bristol, in the family of aircraft engineer Peter James Rowling and housewife Anne Volant, who later got a job at a school. The girl's parents met on a train leaving London King's Cross Station for Scotland. The young people quickly got married and dreamed of a son, and came up with the name John before the child's birth. But they had an adorable girl, and to keep it close to the dream, she got the name Joan. 2 years later, another daughter, Diana, was born in the family. In 1969, the Rowlings decided to move to the neighboring town of Winterbourne, where little Joan went to school. And 5 years later, the family had to move again, this time to the small village of Tutshill near Wales. There they bought a very nice Gothic mansion, the appearance of which, and the furnishings, made a huge impression on the little girl. The house was filled with mystery and antiquity. When she grew up and earned a lot of money, she bought this house for $500,000. The move was a real challenge for the 9-year-old because she was very attached to her school friends and teachers. Some people even speculate that the headmaster of the school in Winterbourne, Alfred Dunn, became the prototype of Professor Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter saga. By the way, Joan admitted that he is her favorite character. Because of the separation from the usual environment, the sensitive girl barely communicated with her peers, and apart from her younger sister, she had no friends. As early as age 6, Joan began to create and write down various fantastic stories for Diana, which she adored. Despite her isolation, the future writer studied well at school. She was easily able to study humanities, especially English, which she mastered perfectly, and the teacher always held her up as an example to the whole class, predicting a great future as a writer for her. When Joan turned 15, her mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and the relationship with her father was falling apart, which made her even more withdrawn. After school, the girl applied for admission to Oxford, but failed the exams, so under the influence of her parents, she chose to study languages at the University of Exeter. She studied with little enthusiasm, preferring to listen to the Smiths and read Tolkien and Dickens. Her student years were not completely serene, because according to Rowling herself, at the age of 20, she was sexually abused. The girl spent the last year of her studies in Paris, which she loved with all her heart, and where she felt free and happy for the first time in a while. In 1987, Joan graduated and moved to London, where she found a job as a secretary. There she started her first serious relationship, and after a while, she moved to Manchester with her boyfriend. However, she often traveled to London, and one day in 1990, her train to King's Cross Station was delayed for 4 hours. While Rowling was thinking about what to do with herself, she came up with the idea of a boy wizard. Heroes and their stories appeared in her mind as if by themselves. Joan tried to remember everything carefully because she didn't have a pen with her, and she was just too shy to borrow it from someone else. When Rowling arrived home, the first thing she did was to write down the ideas, and the first several chapters of The Philosopher's Stone were created on that evening. The magical world is imbued with the author's personal experience. The first name of the main character, a thin dark-haired boy in funny round glasses, was chosen because Joan really liked it, and the last name, according to some sources, was borrowed from a childhood friend whose name was Ian Potter. Although Rowling herself never confirmed it, Rowling herself was the prototype for Hermione, and she was always open about it. And the main character's best friend, Ron Weasley, looks like another friend from her youth, Sean Harris. The old Ford Anglia car in which Sean drove Joan around the neighborhood also made its way into the book. In December of 1990, Anne Rowling died after 10 years of struggle with multiple sclerosis. This was very traumatic for Joan, and it was reflected in her first book about Harry, where she described the loss of the boy's parents. In order to somehow escape from failures and gloomy thoughts, Joan went to Portugal, getting a job as an English teacher. There in the coastal city of Porto, she met her future husband, TV journalist Jorge Arantes. After marrying him in 1992, she tried to become a mother, but the first attempt ended unsuccessfully. At the same time, the first red flags appeared. The hot-tempered Jorge constantly took out his anger on his wife and often laid his hands on her. In the summer of 1993, their daughter Jessica Isabel was born. The birth of the long-awaited child didn't improve the situation, and when the girl was 5 months old, Joan ran away, taking Jess in a suitcase with manuscripts. In early 1994, Rowling and her daughter moved in with Joan's younger sister Diana in Edinburgh. The state benefit she received was barely enough to buy food and toys for the child. Besides, Jorge was giving her a really hard time. Sometimes he threatened to get her back and teach her a lesson. And other times, he promised to take her daughter away. Joan even had to request a protective order, and soon she managed to get a divorce and forget about her ex-husband. At the same time, she had already started working on the second Harry Potter book, which she had to write in a cafe while her daughter was sleeping in a stroller. Often in the media, you can find a version that she did this because there was no heating in her apartment. But Joan claims that little Jess just fell asleep quicker on a walk, and that gave Joan more time to write. Only literary work in a small child saved Rowling in those dark times. And again, all the most difficult experiences migrated to the pages of the novel. She created dementors, disgusting entities that steal joy and pleasant memories from people. This is a surprisingly accurate description of depression, which Joan knew firsthand. In 1995, the first manuscript was finally finished, and all that remained was to find a publishing house. With the support of a literary agency, she sent the Philosopher's Stone to 12 companies, but every one of them refused to publish it. Only a year later, she had a stroke of luck after all. The youngest daughter of one of the publishers read the first chapter of the book and was so delighted that she immediately demanded more. After that, editor Barry Cunningham from Bloomsbury Publishing gave Rowling an advance of £1,500, but advised her to find another job anyway, because in his opinion, it's simply impossible to make money on children's literature. In addition, they told the writer to replace her name with initials. The publisher was afraid that people wouldn't buy the book of a female author. Since Joan doesn't have a middle name, she took the name of her grandmother, Kathleen, and ended up with the abbreviation JK. However, soon Joan received a grant in the amount of £8,000 so that she could devote herself to writing, and the whole world learned her real name. In June 1997, the first edition of the book was published in a run of 1,000 copies, and half of the books went to the libraries. Today, these first copies with a watercolor illustration on the cover cost an average of $25,000. A few months later, the Philosopher's Stone was awarded the prestigious Nestle Smarties Book Prize and the British Book Awards in the category Children's Book of the Year. 1998 brought Rowling an even bigger surprise. Publishers arranged an auction for the right to republish her first book. The American publishing house Scholastic paid $105,000, and Joan herself, in her own words, almost died from such news. In the United States, the novel was released in October of the same year, but under the title Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because marketers saw in the original title the risk of scaring off children with the word philosopher. Rowling herself agreed with this, but later she said that she was very sorry, and if she had been in a different position then, she would never have allowed the name to be changed. But from then on, her position changed forever. She gained control over her life and could set her own terms. First of all, she moved from her sisters to a new house at 19 Hazelbank Terrace in Edinburgh. Following The Philosopher's Stone, in July 1998, a second book was published titled Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, which again brought Joan the prestigious Nestle Smarties Award. 6 months later, the third part of the saga, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, was published and gave the author her third similar award, and Rowling became the first writer in the history of the award to receive the grand prize 3 times in a row. At some point, She even felt awkward and decided not to submit a fourth book to the competition in order to give other authors the opportunity to win. In the same year, the film company Warner Brothers bought the rights to adapt the first two Potter books, which earned Joan more than $1 million. Later, these figures will look just ridiculous, of course, but a huge advantage of the contract was that Rowling had the opportunity to participate in the filming process herself. Thus, she wished that no significant edits be made to the narrative, the portrayals, and the personalities of the characters. In addition, she demanded that all the actors for the main roles be British. The Philosopher's Stone premiered on November 16, 2001 in the USA and the UK.
You're Harry Potter. I'm Hermione Granger. And...
Ron Weasley.
Pleasure.
The movie delighted the public, took 3 Oscars, and had a tremendous commercial success. The worldwide box office exceeded $1 billion. At the end of 2001, Rowling's life took another turn, this time in her personal life. On December 26th, the star writer married the physician Neil Murray. They decided to make the ceremony as private as possible and held it at their Scottish estate. The media only learned that 15 guests attended the celebration, and the bridesmaids were Rowling's daughter from her first marriage, her sister Diana, and Neil's sister Lorna. A fun fact is that to quietly buy a wedding dress, Joan had to use a disguise, otherwise she risked being recognized on the street. 2 years later, the couple had a son who was named David Gordon. At the same time, the Bloomsbury Publishing House published the book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which is actually a textbook on the care of magical creatures owned by Harry Potter and the books. Sales were good. Together with another relic of the Hogwarts library called Quidditch Through the Ages, they grossed almost $2 million. Almost all the money was directed to charity. This was followed by the film adaptations of the second and third parts of the story about the boy who lived.
Demental!
Meanwhile, J.K. Rowling released the fourth book, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which broke all sales records as expected.
I reckon you have to be barking mad to put your own name in the Goblet of Fire.
Come on, have you? Took you long enough?
During the first day, almost 400,000 copies were sold in England alone. In the United States, the figures turned out to be even more staggering. 3 million books were sold in just 48 hours. For Rowling, on the other hand, it turned out to be very difficult to write the fourth part. While working on the book, she realized she had made a serious mistake in one of the storylines and rewrote it 13 times until everything became perfect. The break between this novel and the book Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix lasted 3 long years.
I expect us to sell an Azkaban with your name on it. What'd I tell you? Complete nutter. Just stay away from me!
There were rumors that Rowling had writer's block, but she stubbornly denied it. In the summer of 2005, Rowling released the 6th book in the series called Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. The author dedicated it to her newborn daughter Jean, who was born on January 23, 2005. The book was again a huge success. 9 million copies were sold on the first day. The Half-Blood Prince was also highly appreciated by experts, who awarded the book the British Book Award. The release of the book was accompanied by huge hype, which even caused an awkward situation. One of the bookstores in Canada hastened to put a few copies on their shelves before the official start of sales. As a result, the publishing house Raincoast filed a lawsuit demanding to prohibit the owners of the books and other persons with access to them to read it and immediately hand over copies to the publisher. The court considered the claim legitimate. As a bonus, the owners were promised to get back their copies with an autograph by J.K. Rowling. In early 2007, it became known that Rowling had finished work on the final book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. It is not surprising that on the first day of sales in the UK, 11 million copies were swept off the shelves of bookstores, and monstrous lines appeared around the world from those who wanted to buy the new book. The film adaptation of the book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, was released in the summer of 2009.
Why is it when something happens, it is always you three?
Believe me, Professor, I've been asking myself the same question for 6 years.
And the last part of the story, Deathly Hallows, was divided into 2 parts and was released in 2010 and 2011.
Yeah, I don't really fancy this colour.
Well, fancy this. You're not you, so shut it and strip. All right, all right. You need to change too, Potter.
Meanwhile, the popularity of the writer kept growing. They made documentaries about her, invited her to cameos in various TV series, and took countless interviews. And the magical world she created went beyond books and movies, turning into an entire universe. In 2011, Rowling announced that work on the Pottermore project had begun, which would be a kind of an encyclopedia of the Harry Potter universe. It's full of additional information about the places of events, characters, storylines that fans of the saga couldn't get enough of. It is worth noting that Joan used all the proceeds from the project for charity. Currently, the Pottermore website has been renamed Magic World, and its participants can find out their Hogwarts house and Patronus, and even get a Gringotts bank account. After the release of the final book, Joan decided to try a different role and write a book for an adult audience. As a result, in 2012, The Casual Vacancy was published, raising awareness about sensitive socio-political issues. The story was a success, and it was adapted for the big screen 3 years later. However, Joan knew that the success of her new brainchild was largely due to her popularity. That's why she wrote her next book, The Cuckoo's Calling, under the male pseudonym Robert Galbraith. Funnily enough, every single publisher which Rowling sent her manuscript to refused to publish it, saying that the story was not impressive. As a result, the first book about the adventures of Detective Cormoran Strike was published by the same publisher as The Casual Vacancy. Besides, the same editor worked on the manuscript, which allowed journalists to get the truth. She had to confirm the authorship, and after that, the books began to sell like hotcakes. Over the next 6 years, the books The Silkworm, Career of Evil, Lethal White, and Troubled Blood were published in the series. Later, the books about Strike were made into movies by the BBC television company. In 2016, Joan moved into the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh, to the very room where she worked on the last part of the series about the young wizard. Apparently, the writer wanted to bring back the memories and do a little bit of mischief, because she posted on her Twitter an image of a marble bust of the ancient god Hermes with a black marker inscription saying that exactly 9 years ago, the last lines of the saga were written in Suite 552, but she warned that writing on the property of the hotel is very bad, and did not recommend following her example. It goes without saying that the hotel staff was just delighted. Since then, the room has become a real place of pilgrimage, and the legendary bust had to be covered with glass, like a museum exhibit. That same year, the story of the wizard from Hogwarts got a sequel in the form of the theatrical play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. It was staged in London's West End and won 9 Laurence Olivier Awards. In the same year, the film Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them premiered worldwide.
Come on, give me a smile. Betty, give me a smile. All right. Now that has been easy.
The script for it and the other 2 parts were written by Rowling herself. In 2020, The Ichabod was published, which is an extremely unusual genre of political fairy tale for children aged 7 to 9 years. Then in 2021, she wrote The Christmas Pig, a very touching story for the younger kids. These are her first books for children that are not centered around Harry Potter and his world. Harry Potter is a worldwide phenomenon and brand worth at least $15 billion, which is comparable with the value of such companies as Audi, IKEA, and Sony. It's not surprising that the little wizard literally made his creator rich. Income is generated not only by writing, but also by payments from Harry Potter theme parks, which are located in the USA and Japan. By 2020, Rowling took first place in the list of the best-selling authors according to Forbes. Her fortune today is $1 billion. In 2013, the Sunday Times stated that Rowling is richer than the English Queen herself, and in 2017, Forbes reported that she beat Cristiano Ronaldo in the list of the highest paid celebrities. At the same time, Joan is quite restrained in her spending, although she still likes to treat herself sometimes. The biggest purchase Rowling made at the very beginning of her writing career was half of a Victorian mansion in Edinburgh. In 2001, she bought the other half from her neighbor, and after a while she received ownership of the adjacent land plot. Now the estate is well maintained and has a beautiful garden. Before the sale, Rowling built funny tree houses in the Hogwarts style on the estate. The fabulous mini-town cost her $300,000. The property was eventually sold to an unnamed Scottish businessman for almost $3 million. In the same year, she bought Killichassy House, a 19th century estate near the capital of Scotland. The property cost the writer $654,000, and now the property is estimated at about $2 million and is considered one of the best estates in the United Kingdom. Externally, the house looks like an old castle and is surrounded by 70 acres of land. By the way, Joan and Neil's wedding took place in this house. According to some reports, the couple took their wedding vows in their home library. Rowling also has a luxury 6-bedroom townhouse in a respectable London neighborhood, which she bought for $5.7 million. Joan also often arranges family getaways, for example, to the Hamptons, New York, where she rents a house by the ocean for an average of $100,000 a week. Since Rowling loves vacations by the sea, she can spend more than $20,000 on a cruise to the Galapagos Islands or a vacation on the Emerald Island of Mauritius. In 2016, she even bought Johnny Depp's 48-meter yacht for $28 million, but quickly became disappointed in the purchase and put it up for sale, significantly lowering the price. The new owner of the vessel was offered to pay only $19 million. There is a reason why fans dubbed her the cute nickname Mama Row. It describes her role in the life of an entire generation very accurately. Back in 2000, she founded a charity organization, and since then, has been helping people from all over the world fight poverty and social inequality. To date, she has spent over $150 million on charity. The writer is also actively involved in research programs and new treatments for multiple sclerosis, which her mother suffered from. Although in recent years J.K. Rowling has become a victim of the cancel culture, the magic world she created continues to be a refuge for millions of people and gives hope for the triumph of good over evil. What is your favorite book by J.K. Rowling? If you like the video, leave a like and also subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss anything interesting.